Put my knees up.
Okay, we'll give it a few more minutes. Good afternoon, Ami. You look like a man who thinks it's the morning. The portholes in that building are so beautiful, the light. I don't know if you can see it. Really lovely. Sorry? Yeah. Well, they're designed to let in a lot of light, right? Because they didn't have that much light. Okay, can everyone settle down, please? Settle down, please. Right. So today we're going to have a substantive lecture on ritual. Did people watch the podcast or listen to it? You have to tell me because how I teach you depends on whether you did or not. So one of you didn't? How many of you didn't listen to it? Is there any reason why not? Okay. Well, try and listen to it in the future because otherwise it's a bit unfair on people who do listen to the podcast because otherwise they get the lecture twice, which can be a bit aggravating. Okay. So we're going to talk about ritual today. Can anyone tell me what they understand by the term? Yeah.
Well, to me, like I use ritual in the sense that it's like a certain acts or practices which you do like intentionally, and there's kind of like sets of things which you do to like invoke a certain mood or a certain intention which you're trying to bring in.
Okay, very good. So your definition gives us, it's a perfectly good definition. What is it missing? Yeah? Sorry?
Maybe like a repetition.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, still missing something though. That's pertinent to this course. Yeah?
Maybe it takes like a ceremonial type, like a ceremony.
It can be a ceremony, yeah. But as we know from Lerman, it can also be a very private thing. Right? So we use the term ritual for both secular and non-secular things, right? So people might say, this is our family ritual of gathering together every Sunday for a roast dinner. Yeah? It's repetitive, so that incorporates your point. It's a set of practices that brings together people and things in particular ways, so that's your point. But the thing that's missing for the anthropology of religion is the fact that ritual mediates. Right? Ritual in religion is a bridge between you and the here and now and the transcendental, that which lies beyond. Right? The divinities, God, supernatural beings, all kinds of things. Yeah? So we can take the definition given by the two of you and partly by you, although ritual does not have to involve a big ceremony. It can be a very private, personal thing. And we end up with that sort of definition, which has the points that you made, but it also has that quite important thing for the anthropology of religion, which is precisely its role in bridging, right? Or bringing the transcendental into the here and now in some way. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. Any questions about any of this? No? Okay. So these are the key texts that the podcast uses, as well as today's lecture. You don't have to read all of these, yeah? But if you want to, obviously you're more than welcome to. The one I'll be drawing the most on is Rappaport and Joel Robbins for today. Okay? pretty big thing. In the sense, people have paid a lot of attention to it. Not just the people who are performing these rituals or participating in them, but also anthropologists. Because for several scholars, ritual is at the heart of religion. Those of you who will read, who are reading The Cow in the Elevator, will see how important ritual is in this rapidly changing place. Yeah? It's partly what allows people to ground themselves, to find ways of navigating this massive set of opportunities, as well as precarities that being a kind of global IT capital brings. Okay? So ritual is really important, and there are many ways of defining ritual. So we have three here. A functional definition tells you what religion is for, what it does. Now Durkheim has a very functional definition of religion. For him, of ritual, sorry. For him, ritual is what allows society to come together to reinforce those collective beliefs. Right? So ritual is what enables social reproduction by bringing people together periodically to do stuff together that then tells them, we are a group, these are the things that are important for us. And that's how we know we are together, because not only do we do these things together, but we hold these things to be important. Yeah, that's a very functional definition of religion. Does that make sense? Yeah? We can also have substantive definitions of religion, of ritual, what it is about. Okay, so what is this ritual about? It could be about any number of things. Right? The marriage ritual, for instance, is one that is about fidelity. It's two people saying that they will be faithful to each other. Yeah? So that's a substantive definition. Okay? And we can have formal definitions of religion, which is the kind of definition that both of you gave. And it's the kind of definition that we're going to be focusing on today. So well done. So a formal definition essentially specifies certain features that allows us to identify a practice or a set of practices as ritual. So the formal definition can be interested in, but is not really necessarily strictly interested in what that ritual is for or what it's about. It says if we see these kinds of things, then we know that we're in the midst of ritual. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So they're not mutually exclusive, of course. You can approach a ritual through any of these or all of these to try and understand what's going on. So it's not that if you take one kind of definition, you have to forego the rest. They don't cancel each other out. But you can decide, actually, what I'm really interested in is the functional definition, what ritual is for. Or you can decide, okay, I'm interested in working out, is this a ritual or is it not? In which case you would go for the formal definition. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So examples of functional approaches to ritual include Van Gennep. Have you heard of Van Gennep? Did you encounter him in first year? Yeah? So Van Gennep is really famous for what are called the rites of passage. So what he argues is that one of the things ritual does is it moves people from one stage to another stage. Okay. So essentially the marriage ritual moves a person from an unmarried state to a married state with new responsibilities, new ways of being in the world. So it's a very functional definition. And Van Gennep gives us a set of terms that are quite important, although they're not so important for what we're approaching in this course. But the key term that Van Gennep gives us, does anyone know it or remember it? Yeah?
Liminal space.
Liminality. Absolutely. Yeah. So what Van Gennep says is that before the ritual, you're in a certain kind of state, or position, or status, or role. And then in that period of the ritual, you are usually in what's called a liminal state. You are neither this nor that. Yeah? And when the ritual comes to an end, then you move into the new state. Okay? So for instance, let's take you guys. So right now, you're in a particular stage of your lives. Right? You are undergraduates. Yeah? At some point, you will do your final year exams. And then until graduation, until you get that degree certificate in your hand, you're in a liminal state. You are graduates, but you're not quite graduates. Right? That graduation ceremony is what marks that transition. You are now full graduates. You have your transcripts, you have your degree certificates, you can go out into the world and apply for jobs and say, yes, this is proof. Does that make sense? Yeah? So for Van Gennep, this liminal stage is quite important. It's less important now for you guys because your transcripts come out pretty much immediately, so you already can show that you've successfully passed the course. Right? But in certain kinds of spaces, this liminal stage can be very, very important. So for instance, if you're taking death rituals in, say, Tamil Hinduism or Tamil Islam, someone is alive, they die, that's the funeral rituals, and then the family of the dead person goes through a liminal phase when they're in deep mourning, when they're not allowed to eat in other people's houses, when people are not allowed to eat in their own houses, they're not allowed to celebrate. They're not allowed to celebrate festivals, they're not allowed to do a whole bunch of things. So they're in that liminal phase. The funeral is over, the ritual is over, but they're still in that liminal phase of high pollution. And depending on which group you are, it can last for 13 days, it can last for 40 days, whatever it is. And when that period is over, they have another ritual at this point, and then they come out rejoining society as normal. Yeah, so these liminal periods can be very important in terms of what you can do socially speaking. Okay, so for Van Gennep, this was one of the interesting things about ritual, that across the world we observe these kinds of liminal stages. We observe that ritual moves people from one state into another state, and there are often these liminal periods. Okay? So in that sense, Durkheimian interest in ritual is also quite functional. As I told you earlier, for Durkheim, ritual is really important for bringing people together. And it could be for weddings, for funerals, for celebrations of a religious nature. It could be all kinds of things. Okay? So ritual here does something. And we can ask, what does it do? Okay? Any questions about any of that? No? Okay. So I'll just explain that. Okay. So Turner is another person who took on Van Gennep's ideas about ritual. And he was particularly, again, interested in that. That's a permanent marker. He was particularly interested also in that liminal phase. I used to permanent mark on this. So for Turner, this liminal phase he calls communitas. Yeah? So what he argued is that in normal social life, you're governed by structure. These are your roles, these are the things you can do. This is what is expected of you, and so on. And this is how different kinds of people relate to you. And then he says, there are periods that he calls periods of communitas, where these normal structures, these normal rules break down. Yeah? And you can think about carnival as one of these things. But there are loads of things like that, where the ways in which you normally are meant to behave, the ways in which you are meant to behave vis-a-vis others, the kinds of roles that you occupy socially, seem to collapse. Yeah? And carnival is really one of the best examples of this kind of thing. In Communitas, says Turner, the breakdown of these rules, actually, when people come out of that Communitas stage, they move right back into structure in a way that reinforces structure. Okay, so he says that societies need these moments of communitas, these moments of lawlessness, if you like, or a different set of almost no rules, or a different way of being with each other. And when they come out of those times, then social structure gets reinforced. Okay? And for our purposes, one of the spaces that we can think of this happening is when people take Holy Communion. So you go to church, you might be a rich person, you might be a poor person, you might be a woman, you could be all kinds of things, and you might have particular roles associated with these statuses. Yeah? But when you go to communion, it is you and that relationship with God, where everyone is equal in the eyes of God, everyone is taking that communion. And so you are in a community of brotherhood or sisterhood or an egalitarian space, if you like. Yeah? But when you come out of communion, you go right back into those rules and roles. You might be slightly transformed. You might see social life slightly differently. But you don't come out thinking we're all equal now, because that's not the way the social world is set up. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So this is Turner's understanding. So these are all people who draw on that functional way of thinking about ritual. Yeah? Turner, Van Gennep, and Durkheim. And now we turn to Rappaport. So Rappaport gives us a very formal definition of religion. He says, if you see certain things that are happening in particular ways, then you know you're in the midst of ritual, or you're observing ritual. Okay? So he says, and this comes to the point someone was making about repetition, he says ritual is the performance of more or less invariant sequences, so they don't change, they happen over and over again in the same order, of formal acts and utterances that are not entirely encoded by the performers. So the performers are not making it up as they go along. Yeah? They are not the ones giving the full meaning to whatever it is that they are doing, but they are doing these things over and over and over again in very particular ways. Okay? So let's see what he does with that. So you can already start to see the difference between functional, substantive, and formal definitions of religion, right? One tells you what it's for, of ritual, sorry, I keep mixing up the two. One tells you what ritual is for, one tells you what ritual is about, and one tells you how to identify ritual. Okay? Any questions about any of this? Is this all clear so far? Yeah. Was that a question? No? Okay. Right. So for instance, and I'll give you a personal example. So growing up in South India, on Saturdays or Sundays, usually, they would oil all the children's hair. They'd warm a cup of sesame oil, and then they'd sit you on the veranda, and they'd put oil in your hair. And that's just supposed to be good for hair growth, it's supposed to be nice for you. It's quite an intimate moment when your mother or your grandmother or someone in the house is just rubbing your head with oil, and then you're sent off to wash your hair, and it's quite nice. But oiling your hair is also something that we do at certain times, during certain festivals. And when we do it in that ritual sort of way, we do it slightly differently. So here you see my mother and me. We're in front of the household shrine, You can see the images of the gods behind. There are offerings to the gods just there, the coconut, the bananas and things like that. And my mother is going to oil my hair, but she does it for a very particular reason, which is to say to the gods, let this oil cool her. Yeah? Let her be calm. Let her be patient. Give her these virtues. Okay? Here we are definitely in the space of ritual, unlike, for instance, when they're just oiling your hair on the veranda and there's music playing and people coming and going. Does that make sense? Yeah? So not every time you do this thing is not necessarily a ritual. It has to have these other features which for Rappaport are really important. Is that reasonably clear? Yeah? Okay. Okay, so ritual clearly is very important. We've seen how it's important for someone like Durkheim. It permits orderly social reproduction. We've seen how it's important for someone like Geertz. It intensifies the kinds of moods that are considered to be good. It intensifies your feelings of virtue. Yeah? For Rappaport, what ritual does is, he says, it's the ground from which religion grows. It is absolutely crucial to religion, he says. Okay? This is because, he argues, that it is in ritual that the grounds or the domain of the holy is generated. Okay, so if we go back to this image, yeah, this ritual is really important because it does something. It says that we are a family that are here calling upon the gods to help us do something. We are making offerings. We are generating this thing called the holy. Okay? I'm not even remotely religious anymore. My mom still is though. Okay. So what does this holy comprise? For Rappaport, it comprises of four things. Yeah? The first one is the sacred. What we say about religion, the texts, the kinds of things people say, the prayer that my mother would have said before putting the oil on my head, before offering it the oil to the gods and then putting it on my head. Yeah? So that's the sacred, the discursive aspect of religion, that which is spoken. Okay? The second thing is what he calls the numinous. The numinous is that which can't be spoken. It's that kind of emotion that you feel. That sort of peace or calm or effervescence, and I'll talk about that later, that comes, that allows you to feel that you're part of something bigger than you. Okay? The third is the occult. That is the particular things that religion is understood to do. Yeah? It's efficacy, how efficient it is at transforming you and allowing you to access that which is not immediately present. And finally, the divine, the God, the gods, the supernatural entities, whatever it is. So what ritual does, says Rappaport, is it brings all these things together. Yeah? And that's what that series of invariant sequences of action that are not fully encoded by the performer do, is that it brings these four things together and integrates them into what he calls the holy. And the holy shares the same root as the word health. It is about a certain kind of well-being that only ritual can give. Okay. Any questions about any of that? No? Okay. So I'm going to show you an example of a ritual, and I would like you to please watch it and then see if you can think through the kinds of things I've been telling you. Oh God, does anyone remember how Megan did the button? Show sound.
Source or
This one, isn't it? Free.
Time PC. What she said? Wasn't this what she changed at the bottom?
Did she?
Digital input. No, that's...
No, because we need this audio system.
Well, you might have done it actually. Try now.
When you take communion,
Okay.
well, let's eat together. It is so powerful and so beautiful that God would make it so easy to share his power, to share his blessing, that we would simply eat a piece of bread by faith, trusting that it represents his body and it transforms our lives. And we just thank God, just praise him right now. Father, I just thank you for your anointing released in my life. Lord, I pray and I thank you for the anointing being released in every person's life watching this broadcast and taking communion in Jesus' name. Now let's drink the cup, and I want to lead you in this profession and this prayer as well. Say this out loud after me. Say, Heavenly Father, I believe your blood is blessed. I believe drink this cup. Thank you, Lord. Praise God. Praise you, Jesus. Father, we just worship you. We just love you. We thank you for delivering us, for healing us, for setting us free. We thank you for your anointing that removes everything. In Jesus' name.
Okay. Right, what did you make of that? Did that help ground some of the points that I was making earlier about the formality of that ritual? What were the elements that we saw? What were the things that he was using? What were the things that he was using? Yep. Yep. Okay. Okay. Do there have to be any special kind of bread? Does anyone here take communion? No? It's a very special kind of bread. It's called, I think it's called a matzah in America, but it's like a wafer. It's really thin. I remember years ago when I was an undergraduate, in one of our English lecturers brought us communion bread and said, okay, put that in your mouth and then write about how you feel when you put it in your mouth. And of course, we were a very mixed religious group, as one finds in India. And those among us who were brought up in Hindu households, we had no idea what this bread was. So, we put it in our mouth and we started writing, and it was just like, it feels very papery, it's just dissolving on my tongue, it seems to have no taste or flavor or calories even. So I'm not quite sure what this bread is all about. Whereas the Christians in the class, definitely, they knew what that bread was. And so what they wrote about that experience was completely different. For some of them, it was really shocking that you would have communion bread outside of communion. And for some of them, it was quite interesting to see this bread outside of the regular context where they consumed it. Yeah, so there's a very particular bread. And he's saying, if you have that kind of bread, great. If you don't, any bread will do. Right? So the point is that in that ritual space, it can be that thing, but if you don't have that thing itself, something else can stand for it and do that same, play that same role. Yeah? Similarly with wine, he's talking about grape juice really, he's not talking about wine. And in some places, in temperance churches for instance, they don't really have wine, they just have grape juice. So here, he's saying if you have grape juice, great. If you don't have grape juice, water will do. Yeah? Again, we see that there have to be two things, one to drink and one to eat. Ideally, they should be the right two things, but if they are not, something else can stand in for that. Because that ritual transforms any ordinary bread into the bread, the body of Christ. And the ritual transforms any liquid into the blood of Christ. Yeah? Does that make sense? Yes.
I know that says, I know the reason why it's like bread and wine, it says in the Bible, it's like Jesus has that whole thing, drink the wine, drink the bread. But it's like, why bread and wine?
Why bread and wine? I guess those were the things that they had in Palestine at the time.
Okay.
Those are the most common kind of unleavened bread.
Okay.
And some kind of rough wine, maybe the water wasn't that safe to drink.
Yeah. It was like the wafer bread. I guess that's not very like that when I think about like Middle Eastern bread, that's not really bread.
It's uneven, right? That's the point. It's not made with yeast necessarily.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I guess if you're trying to feed a lot of people, then you don't want to be cutting baskets of bread, so you just have the wafers. I have no idea. It's the simple answer to that question. I can make some guesses, but your guess is as good as mine about why exactly those two things. Yes?
I was just going to say that it's mimicking the Jewish ritual of Kiddush.
There you go.
That's why it's the bread and wine. Originally, it would have been leavened, but it's mimicking the event of the Exodus where it came undone and that sort of thing.
Okay, well there you go. We've got an answer now. Thank you. Okay, so we have the two things that are necessary. Ideally they should be the right kind of thing, but if they're not, it doesn't matter. Yeah? Can you see how he's invoking all the four things that Rappaport is telling us? Let's go back to that. Yeah. Can you see how that in that ritual he's invoking the sacred? Yeah. He is using the words of the prayer in which he's leading his viewers to invoke that sacred. That this is your blood. Thank you for anointing us. Yeah? These are the things you have to do. Drink it now. Say this prayer. Yeah? So there's definitely that kind of discursive element to this ritual. For him, he's also trying to invoke, and it's a hard thing to do when you're just doing it over television, he's trying to invoke the numinous aspects as well. Okay? That peace, that transformative, when he's raising his arms, he's saying, I'm feeling something. You should be feeling it too. Yeah? So he's definitely trying to invoke that numinous. He's definitely invoking the occult, saying, having had this, I feel transformed. This has had an effect on me. It will have that effect on you. Yeah? Did you see that in the clip? Yeah? And finally, the spiritual references are there all the time because he's constantly invoking God. Right? So he's saying, you are here. You have come into me now. You have given me this. I thank you. Yeah? So that's a classic ritual, even though it's by a televangelist, on TV, he's still pulling together all these four things in the way that Rappaport says. It's important if you want to identify something as a ritual. Does that make sense? Any questions about any of that? No? Okay. So Rappaport tells us some further things. A ritual is always a performance. Yeah? Something is always being done, and it's being done to an audience. That audience could be you yourself. When you have that bread, when you have that grape juice or wine or water or whatever it is, you are saying something to yourself. You are performing that ritual to yourself to say, this is a special space. You are now doing this thing that is really important. Yeah? So it's a kind of performance for yourself. It's a kind of performance for the world to say, I am doing this. This tells you that I am this kind of person doing this important thing right now. And it's also a performance to whatever divinity it is that you're invoking. You are saying to God, as he was doing, thank you, you are here. You are here now in this space. Yeah? So a ritual is always a performance. Does that make sense? Yeah? So in that sense, Rappaport tells us that unlike a play or a concert or something, everyone who participates, everyone who is in that space of the ritual is a participant. They're not just audience. Because they are part of that performance. And they are telling themselves something as well as telling the world something, as well as telling those supernatural entities something. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. The other thing comes back to the point one of you made. They are repetitive. So every Sunday, this kind of ritual will take place. And it will take place in more or less exactly the same way. Okay? So it might be every week as in communion, it might be every year as in a Christmas Mass, or whatever it is, but it will take place periodically, well, regularly usually, and it will take place in the same kinds of ways. Yeah? What is important is that this kind of invariance and this kind of routinization doesn't necessarily or very rarely leads to loss of meaning. The ritual is meaningful each time. Or it's meant to be meaningful each time. Of course, you might be distracted in some personal, because you have a personal crisis. You might be pissed off because your mom's dragging you off yet again to the church or the temple or the mosque or the synagogue or whatever it is. But that ritual is meaningful in that space. Okay, for some people, it is always meaningful. And we see that in Lerman. In Lerman, whether they're doing a silent ritual communing with God just by themselves, or whether they're doing it in church, it has meaning. They are speaking to God. They are bringing these elements together in some way. Okay, so here, routinization does not lead to loss of meaning. And you'll see it in all your monographs. Okay. And efficacy, ritual does something. It does something to the people who are participating in it, for whom it is meaningful. It can transform your understanding of the world, even if only temporarily. This is Geertz's point. It can make you feel blessed. It can make you feel powerful. It can make you feel part of this group. Yeah? So ritual has to be efficacious. If it's not efficacious, it will drop away. And we know all the time that rituals drop away. Yeah? People have to feel that something is happening here. Any questions about any of that? No? Okay. I've already told you about the ritual as a mode of communication. Yeah? When you go back to look at this lecture for when you're revising or anything, watch that video again. You really see how it pulls together quite a lot of the things that this lecture has been about. Yeah? Okay. So the ritual always, as I said to you, ritual is a performance. It is transmitting messages. Right? There are two kinds of messages that ritual transmits. One is self-referential. I am here. I am doing this thing. I expect to be transformed. I expect to somehow come in communion with this transcendental being that I'm trying to reach. Okay? So it's self-referential. I am Hindu. I am Muslim. I am Christian, and I'm doing this ritual to reach my God. So it's self-referential, refers to the self in some way. But it's also canonical. Do you know what canonical means? Yes? No?
Like in the kind of mainstream run of things.
Canonical just means a thing that is true across time. So when we say, this is canonical in the mainstream, we're essentially saying right now this is true across the board. Does that make sense? Yeah? So we use it in popular language to say, yeah, this is generally true. It's generally, it's a mainstream thing. So here, what it means is that this is true across the board. So what ritual is also communicating is something about, for instance, the goodness of God in the ritual that you saw, the power of God, or the love that God has for you, that He would enter you with the bread and the wine or water or grape juice or whatever it is. And across the board this is true. Anyone, anywhere can be having this bread and wine in this way, and across the board it is the case that they are inviting God into themselves and their lives. Does that make sense? Yeah? So ritual does those two kinds of communication, self-referential communication and canonical communication. Okay, so it's kind of timeless messages, what Geertz described as the really real. Yeah? Any questions about any of that? No? Are you understanding, or are you just not people who like to speak in class? Because this is important for me to know. Because if you're not understanding, then I would put more work into explaining. But if you are understanding, If I have to do that, then it becomes tedious for you. Right? So it's much better to tell me. If something makes sense, tell me when I ask you. If something doesn't make sense, tell me. Yes?
I'm a bit confused. In this sense, can we consider rituals as media?
Well, rituals are, yes, absolutely. A ritual is a mediator, and it will use diverse forms of media. So when you think about the material religion and mediation lecture, a ritual is a mediator par excellence. It really does that mediating between you in the here and now and what is transcendental. And it does so through deploying a variety of things: words, gestures, objects, consumables, all kinds of things. So yes, ritual is a form of mediation. So you look puzzled still.
No, I'm just thinking of.
Okay.
Yes, thanks.
Does that make sense, people? Yes.
With the canonical messages, is it about what the people who are following those rituals conceive of as the canon that they're following, or what the actual historical, beliefs of the group have been?
Well, it doesn't have to be the actual historical, because if you remember from Lerman, these people, their Christianity looks really different from other forms of Christianity. But it's what they agree, in some sense, collectively, as being the truth. So for them, the truth is that God loves them and He's present and real in the world. That's the canonical message.
Yeah.
Right? And then when you are doing the ritual for yourself, you are saying, God, I know you love me, I love you, come and speak to me. Right? So that's the self-referential bit. So the canonical message is generally the thing that is generally agreed that this is the truth. Yeah? Any other questions? No? Okay. Now, this paper is a really nice paper. I'm just going to very briefly run you through it. Essentially, for Joe Robbins, he's puzzled by the fact that there are so many rituals, even in the same religion, even in the same subgroup. It's not as if there's only one ritual that people do. So he says rituals do something else. So we're back into the functionalist world. He says rituals do something else. What they do is that they tell people and they show people what is important. And because for any given group of people there are lots of different things that are important, different rituals highlight different important things. Okay? So he's trying to answer the puzzle of why, if you have a particular religion, why do you not just get one kind of ritual? Why do you get tens, hundreds even? Okay? So essentially, in any given religious tradition, he says, you'll get lots of different kinds of ritual because each ritual is highlighting something that is important, considered important. Okay? So if you think of it as an example, in Christianity, the Christian marriage, remember, Christian marriage is monogamous, so one man marrying one woman. Some churches are now allowing same-sex marriage, but we'll stick with the male-female. So it's one man marrying one woman, and in that particular ritual, what you get is two people promising, in the eyes of God, in the eyes of other people, that they're going to be faithful to one another. Yeah? And they're not going to marry anyone else. Beginning in the sin in Christianity. So essentially, what that marriage ritual does is it shows people the importance of fidelity. It says fidelity is an important virtue, and this ritual shows you that it's an important virtue. Does that make sense? Yeah? You might have another kind of ritual that shows something else that is important in Christianity. So you might have the Lenten, that entire period, where you are trying to live by denying yourself certain things. Yeah? And the Good Friday rituals which show you that sacrifice that Jesus made. Right? Or you might have the weekly communion, where everyone is having exactly the same thing in exactly the same way, to show you that everyone is equal in the eyes of God. All of these are values in Christianity, and each ritual highlights a different value. Does that make sense? So Robinson's point is that you get a lot of rituals in the same religion, and they're doing slightly different things. So the canonical message is not a single message, there's a multitude of messages, and different rituals reveal those messages. Yeah? Does that make sense? Okay. I'm going to move quickly now because I want to give you a break before we move to the next part. So I've just told you this. Okay. So there's another paper on your reading list which I'm very quickly going to talk to you about. And it's a really nice paper because what this man is doing, Xiao Wu, is that he's saying that what rituals do two things, he says. One is they actually aim to do something in the world. Yeah? They always aim to do something in the world. Transform you, give you a better crop, bring the rain, whatever it is. And they usually work through a combination, he tells us, of actual physical things that have a causal relationship. Do you know what I mean by that? Yeah? So if I take this and I throw it, yeah, I've done something. It has landed there because I have thrown it physically, right? That's a physical causal relationship, right? Now if I take, for instance, a helium balloon and I release it, unfortunately this will not go up. If I release it, yeah, there's a physical reason why that helium balloon goes up. It's because helium is lighter than air. But I might also posit that in releasing that balloon, I'm somehow letting my troubles go up to the sky where God will take care of them. Does that make sense? So usually, he says, rituals have a physical aspect, a physical causal aspect, and they have another aspect that overlays that physical causal action with something else, with a meaning. Right? That you have to infer, that you have to be taught in some sense. Does that make sense? Yeah? So they're always doing things in the world. I light a fire and I wave it in front of the gods, and as the smoke rises, I say, look, my message is going to the gods. But I'm having to light that fire, I'm having to do this stuff. Yeah? So ritual has to be performed, it has to be done. And it always is done in some practical, physical way, with some other stuff, other meanings and symbolisms added to it, that make it bring together the whole. Does that make sense? Yeah? So, at the beginning when I asked what is ritual and one of you said it's a set of practices, you are absolutely right. It is something that you do. And then why you do it, to whom you're doing it, what kinds of messages you're communicating, how it does both the canonical and the self-referential, these will all vary according to what values are being enacted, according to the particular canonical truths that that religion is espousing, and so on. But ritual is always something you do. Okay? Okay. So just to finish before your break, ritual is one of the big things in the Anthropology of Religion. It's big, big, big thing. You are unlikely to read any text in the Anthropology of Religion, or indeed any text in religion that does not in some way speak about ritual. Because it is precisely ritual that allows that kind of mediation that is really crucial in religion. Okay? But you can also have non-religious rituals. Yes?
So just like the slide before, I understand what you were saying, but I didn't really understand how that relates to like cultural facts.
Yes. It's better to read the paper, and the cultural facts are really, in his language, essentially kind of the same thing as the canonical messages. So he uses the term cultural facts, that a group of people had certain beliefs, certain ideas by which they lead their lives. And those for him become what he calls virtual facts for this particular author. Yeah? So it's just particular ways of understanding and being in the world that mark you out as a group. Yeah? I mean, that's a slightly old-fashioned style of writing, but that's essentially what he means. Okay, so we can also have non-religious rituals. Of course, your graduation will be one. Nation-building rituals, the cenotaph memorial on Remembrance Day, for instance, the big Independence or Republic Day parades in various countries, national days where people come together, coronation, these are all secular rituals. They all, like all rituals, point to something that is bigger than you. It doesn't have to be something that is a god, but it could be a nation. Also a kind of invisible, imagined entity that somehow you feel part of in some really important way. Yeah? So you can have rituals of the family. So this notion of ritual has really moved beyond religion, even though it really starts in the anthropology of religion, to take in a whole bunch of things that people do that make them feel part of something that is not quite visible, that is beyond them and much bigger than them. Football day rituals, for instance. Yeah? Match day songs. We'll talk about that in effervescence. Okay? That's it. Let's take a break and then we'll have a short session on effervescence. If you come back at 2:10. I have done it. I just did it. No, I just went through every one of my plans and I've just gone out and thrown the ones that don't work away. Oh, is there? Who's Oh? Oh. I wonder if it's... Okay. Oh, I'll look at it. It might be Gelner. And Gelner wrote a lot about ritual. I'll check. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, exactly. Especially the one where you're not allowed to call someone a liar. Even if they're lying to them. Well, that's why I think I like Rappaport's formal. Because of course, this is one of the only places where I think adjectives are necessary. So you might say this is a non-religious ritual, this is a religious ritual. And then if it's religious, then it has to do those four things. If it's non-religious, also it has to do those four things, but then you might get rid of the divine and supplement or replace it with, the nation, some other, but that entity has to be transcendental in some sense. So brushing your teeth every day at the same time, to me, is not a ritual. Although people use that language, then I think it becomes too broad. Well, I think academia is really, we cannot speak of it as a religion because it doesn't posit a transcendental. It posits that everything is there for the understanding. Or not, or something that is not yet understood, but that does not lie beyond the realm of understanding. And that is our raison d'etre, Yeah, I mean, that is saying something very precise, right? That these are all always provisional. I mean, that's essentially what he's saying, no? Yeah. We're gonna have baptism now. Okay, settle down, please. Okay, we're now going to talk about something important that ritual is understood to do, that keeps people participating in rituals. This is a term called effervescence. Can someone tell me what effervescence is? That's the one. Do you want to put it in words?
It's just like bubbles.
Bubbles. Absolutely.
Fizzing.
Yep, it's that fizzy fabulousness that comes from that mouthful of champagne that's perfectly cold and all the bubbles explode in your mouth. Or Coca-Cola. Or it's generally a really good feeling, a bubbly, fizzy feeling. Okay? And for Durkheim, one of the reasons why ritual works really well is because it produces this effervescence, this kind of bubbly, fizzy feeling of energy and emotion, and that people just feel when they're caught up in the action. Yeah? So where ritual doesn't produce this kind of effervescence, often it can fall flat. People don't feel anything, they may not come back for more. Right? So for Durkheim, ritual produces effervescence, or ideally it should produce effervescence, and this is what gives that kind of collective ritual, or even, he doesn't really talk about private rituals, but we know that it does in Lerman's book. And when people are journaling quietly by themselves, they feel something. When they're listening to someone and they feel that click, that's that effervescence. It's what keeps people coming back. Okay? Okay, I'm going to show you 4 YouTube videos of rituals from different religions. The first one is a baptism. It's an evangelical church in Liverpool. It's an evangelical church in Liverpool, and you'll see in a second. Okay. So what were we watching? Yep.
I think it's fascinating how they're taking after Hillsong. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not.
It's originated in Australia,
Mm-hmm.
where it's evangelical Christian, but they're using the idea of a concert to bring in people.
Yeah, a lot of evangelical churches do that now.
But it was made in a wide-scale arena format, and they exported that into America.
Okay.
Where it turned into a situation where people would be lining up around the blocks to go into this Sunday concert.
Yeah. And that's the point about effervescence, right? You can see exactly how this kind of music can create that sort of effervescence. You can see the people with their arms in the air, you can see them cheering every time someone is baptized. So having music is often a very common way of creating effervescence, as we'll see. Yes?
There's a big Hillsong evangelical music festival that happens once a year in the States.
Okay.
I can't remember where, but they do group baptisms as part of that.
Right.
So it's very something.
Yeah, because there's a format that works, right? And in some sense, what Rappaport is telling us is that these ways of doing things, they're tried and tested, and then they spread quite fast. So if you watch even kind of humanist gatherings, they often borrow massive elements from whatever the dominant religion is in the place. I don't have a YouTube of a humanist ceremony, like a service. They don't call it a service, they call it a gathering. But it looks like a Christian service. You know, it's just that God is not in the picture. So once you have a series of things that works, then rituals tend to adopt them, even in new forms. So it might start somewhere and you think, wow, this is creating that sort of public feeling. And then, boom, someone else goes, yeah, we can have music too. Or that kind of very public baptism. So one of my research informants, he recently got baptized at this church, and he was telling me how he felt when he got baptized. You know, he said, I just felt amazing, he said. You know, even though he's actually kind of critical about the church because they try and tithe, so they want you to give 10% of your income to the church. And he's very critical of that, but that feeling, he says, of going to the services, of having been baptized for him, it was extraordinary. So he brought, the video of his baptism and showed everyone in this pub where I was meeting him. Literally everyone. We all saw this video. And this Liverpool One church is a massive church. It's very new. It's really very recent, but its congregation is ginormous. And because people are feeling that effervescence is really crucial here. Anything else anyone want to say? Yeah.
I remember I had a friend in secondary school, and she was really, really religious. And she used to go to she used to do stuff like this, the concerts, but she would also go to like a festival. It'd be like the Christian, I think it was called something like Christ Festival, something like that. And I think what she described after coming back from that was something similar to this we were talking about. She would talk about it like it was the most transformative and like unbelievable experience of my life. I don't know, I always thought it was quite strange. They were like doing mosh pits to like
Mosh pits for Christ.
mosh pits for Christ, yeah. This is like a personal experience. I'm personally Muslim, but back in Palestine, there's a camp that you would go to, and it's a really fun camp. Like I went there when I was young, because all my friends were going there. But you go there and you have fun activities throughout the day. However, at night, in the middle and in the morning, they gather you around and in a circle, and you have to like talk about God and Jesus and like your own personal religious experience. And obviously you go there when you were young, and you might go there for fun or whatever. But like at the end, before they were like, we have to sit down, we have to talk about God for an hour, we have to talk about Jesus for an hour, we have to try to connect. And it's very like ritualistic almost in a sense, because you go to this camp for like a couple of days and you sleep over, and you repeat that like throughout the whole week.
Yeah. There's an amazing film by one of the MA in visual anthropology students about a group of young people who do that. And you can really see how transformative it is, because they're all feeding off each other. I mean, that's the other thing. Because you might start off feeling quite shy, and then everyone is talking, and you start feeling emotional, and then you start speaking as well. Yeah, I mean, these things are very powerful. I think Durkheim was right when he talked about why effervescence was something that we really need to understand. It's not just that religion is something cerebral or just a bunch of texts that people read or something that they understand. If they don't feel it, they don't come back. Yeah? And that's really crucial. Any other points anyone wanted to make before I move to the next video? No? Okay, the next one is shorter, I think. Okay, this is the Sufi zikr, where people... Okay, so this is Sufi zikr, where people are chanting the name of Allah, the many names of Allah, and the drums are beating. Anything anyone wants to say about this, or anything you noticed? Yeah.
Well, like I would really like the kind of idea of using like dance and like ritual and religion. Because I mean I did for the ethnography craft, I did it on like the power of dance, like in a completely different context. I did it in like a rave context, not a religious context. But I mean, like I think like while like as they're dancing, they look as like one unified like being, and it's kind of like it brings a sense of oneness and community, and like also as you're dancing in sort of like repetitive ways, which is what they're doing. Like I read that it can bring like altered states of consciousness.
Absolutely.
And like also the drumming as well, like repetitive sounds and stuff like that. It all like kind of the whole like different aspects of it makes like a whole certain like affective state or affective environment of that place where it's like I think that's what like brings about the like effervescence.
Absolutely. And we see that here because, you know, the drums are not necessarily changing tempo that much. They speed up and then they slow down. And then when you're watching, a few people start to speed up. They're starting to jump up and down a bit. They're speeding up and then the whole group starts to speed up. So it's also very imitative, that kind of effervescence. So you feel it and it gets transmitted really quickly into the group. Yeah? Which is partly why people have extended that concept of effervescence that really comes out of the anthropology of religion and ritual in particular into contexts like race. You know, there's definitely an effervescence there. Yeah? And so it doesn't feel that unlikely to talk about a mosh pit for Jesus or a mosh pit for something else, because you're so moved. Do you know what the word affect means? Yeah? So it's that kind of physical, being affected physically by something, not just mentally. It's not like understanding that cerebral, it's your whole body is responding. Okay, and that's what we see there. Sorry, Musana.
Yeah, I was just going to say it was really similar to like Jewish cycle dancing.
We're going to watch one in a second. Okay, so this is an ultra-Orthodox. Who am I calling? My doorbell camera company. Yeah, so it wasn't quite a circle dance, although I did find a video of one yesterday as well, which I kind of toyed between the two. I picked this one because this is the kind of ultra-Orthodox Jewish group that those of you who are reading Feder are reading about. Yeah? So this is in a place called New Square in New York State. It's an incorporated town. That means it has certain rules that apply only to it, and including things like separate pavements for men and women, and practically everything segregated. So one thing you'll have noticed is that this is all male. It's a wedding, it's a traditional ultra-Orthodox wedding, and this is the men's feast and celebration. And there are no women here. At some point the bride will come in and she will stand and people will dance in front of her, but she's completely covered, no one can really see her. Yeah? But those of you who are reading Feder, what I'd like you to think about really is when you have that kind of life-changing doubt that Feder talks about, that when some of these people have that kind of life-changing doubt, and when they think, if I express this doubt and if I get kicked out, because that happens, or custody of my children is taken away, or whatever it is, you can see what they're losing. When you look at that kind of space with all these people clearly, feeling something, feeling that kind of oneness that comes from celebrating something together, if this is the life that you've known, right, this kind of deep sense of community and togetherness is what you've known, to express that kind of doubt and then to be kicked out is really, it's not just a simple thing. You are losing practically everything, including the kind of effervescence and the kind of joy that you get in this kind of communal practice. Does that make sense? So when you're reading Feder, think about, look up YouTube videos of things like celebrations or feasts, because you can really start to see what these people stand to lose and why that double life, it becomes so necessary for them. Yeah?
I'd just like to point out that there would be a separate dance for the women.
Yes. Absolutely, it's not filmed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's on the same day, sometimes on different.
Yeah, absolutely. Because these ultra-Orthodox groups, the women are never filmed.
This is similar to like you have a henna night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for the women also, that life-changing doubt means that they stand to lose quite a lot. And it's very hard. It's not so simple as just saying, I have to be true to myself, because yourself is forged in that sense of community. So just keep that in mind, that empathy for what it means to be able to say, I can't believe this anymore, openly. Sorry, was that a question? No. Okay. Any other points, people? Anything else anyone wants? Who's reading Feder? You enjoying it? Okay. So the last one is a temple procession. This is for people who... Okay, so this is a temple in... Three of us, you'll see there's a description, one chapter has a description of a procession, and the priest is telling the people who are carrying the palki, the palanquin, to move in a certain way to express the emotions that the god is supposed to be feeling. So that everyone can start to feel those emotions. So if you just watch the way the people who are holding the palanquins are moving. Okay, anything anyone wants to say that they noticed? Yes.
Yes, I have seen like difference between the four religions, the religions. I don't want to use the colonial perspective saying that like in modern society, like in Europe, Christianity, the way they practice their rituals is very nice, soft, music. But is it about poverty in some like we have seen the Muslims the way some Muslims the way they perform. It's a bit about like to me it's tough. And here I think it's about poverty. Is it?
This is not a poor area. This is where I grew up. This is the temple my family goes
Yes,
to.
but about the global south there.
No, it's just how many people there are.
I give an example. Take that bill about Shias, where they beat themselves, you have blood. Like, I don't want to say why, because it's not our job, but is there a relationship between the violence they use against themselves as Islamic religions and the terrorist movement in that region? No?
I would be so careful about that. I will not even go there because we're talking about Shia Ashura, which is really much, much, much older than any kind of terrorism in that region. And you should be really careful about making those kinds of connections in too simplistic ways. We don't really see Shia Ashura in that sense, and certainly that's not where quite a lot of the terrorist stuff is coming from at all. So I think you have to be very careful about that. I mean, certainly Shia Ashura, which is the self-flagellation, which is the kind of mourning set of rituals for a particular murder that happened quite early in the history of Islam, is something that has been happening since 786 AD. Yeah? Terrorism is really a new thing. And to transpose those two is very deeply problematic. So I don't think we're going to go there now. We can talk about it later in an office hour. Yeah? Okay. Anything else? The poverty, this is not a poor area. This temple is incredibly wealthy. The main god in that temple has a breastplate of gold that weighs about 10 kilos. The people here are not poor. So it's important not to get confused with not wearing very many clothes with poverty. This is a city which is about 90% humidity, 35 to 40 degrees at all times of the year. So again, and we're talking about a populous country. This is a very popular temple, incredibly popular. And if we'd seen the audiences in Liverpool One Church, again we're talking huge numbers. I mean, the Sufi, the Zikr was also a lot of people, as was the Jewish. So the point is that when rituals work, these big collective rituals work, they will draw in huge numbers of people. That is part of how they do their work. Yeah? So, I mean, when you're seeing these numbers, it's partly because Madras, the city, or Chennai, the city where this is happening, is huge. It's I think it's India's fourth or fifth biggest city. So we're talking about large numbers of people. This is one of the most popular temples in the city. And this festival will draw in crowds from all over the place. Yes, sorry.
So this is the temple that you went to, like, as a, while you were growing up?
Yeah, this is the temple that my family used to go to.
Do you remember, like, what it feels like?
Oh, it feels amazing. It really feels amazing. Because you're hearing the drums, people are really excited, there are vendors everywhere selling funky little toys and balloons. So when you're little, you're really excited by all the color and the stuff. The fact that you can buy utter rubbish for really very little, and cotton candy, and there's a whole bunch of things happening. As you get older, I think, because I became an anthropologist of religion, I started to get excited in other sorts of ways, mostly watching people. But even now, even though I'm not religious at all, when I go to Madras, I still go to this temple when it's quiet, because it's a 10th century temple. It's very beautiful, the architecture is very beautiful, there's always music in there, and you can just sit on these big stone verandas, and people watch and feel quite peaceful and calm. So these spaces are also designed to do things to you and to draw you in, whether or not you profess in some real sense.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's kind of like how sacred temples and stuff, and like the architectural design of them are always designed to make a sort of just
full stillness type,
Yeah.
like mood. It's
Yeah.
when it's kind of empty.
Yes, when it's empty. And then they can also be used because they're so big.
Yeah.
You know, you can also fill them up quite quickly and then boom, off you go. Yeah, sorry.
Thinking about, going back to how they're dressed. I'm comparing it to there's a thought in the Jewish tradition that you assume the dress that is locally considered to be the acceptable dress.
Mhm.
So this is what is locally accepted to be well off. It's a good standard dress.
Yeah.
There's no sign of poverty locally for them. But if, let's say, any of those men would travel into, let's say, New York City, he would feel the need to get into jeans and a t-shirt or a suit.
Oh, yeah,
because
yeah,
that's more-
absolutely.
So you have to take it within the context, the wider context.
Yeah.
I haven't been exposed to a lot of Hindu traditions, but I would assume, it's going to be horrible to do, but I would assume that a Hindu person going to a temple here would not be wearing exactly what they're wearing
It's too
here.
cold.
Exactly. Everyone is too cold. But even, but even in summertime, because you take the tradition to where you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's.
And these are global cities. So if those of you who are reading Srinivas will see that the people who will be participating in rituals like this in Bangalore, for instance, are traveling to New York, to Dubai, to Australia. They're working in these big global IT kind of companies. And so they're very au fait with all these things. I mean, I don't know if you noticed, but the number of smartphones that were, these are very technologized spaces as well. That's the other thing that I wanted you to just notice. Yeah? So this idea of traditional and technology being two separate things doesn't really work anymore in these worlds. Okay? In terms of clothing, the priests, so Hinduism is a religion of the kind of structuring dynamic in Hinduism is purity and pollution. And the priests won't wear any stitched clothes because dirt is supposed to adhere in the seams of clothing. So it's all wrapped clothes that can be fully washed. Nothing's going to get trapped in any bit of seam or stitching or anything. So the priests are very particularly dressed because there's a certain kind of idea of what is the right kind of clothing, and it's never tailored for the priest. It's always wrapped. Yeah? So it'll be lengths of fabric. So there are all kinds of reasons why we see people doing things the way they're doing, and it's really important to start thinking, well, why? Is there a reason? What might it be? Okay, so pay attention. And if you have any questions about any of the books that you're reading where you think, I don't quite get it, or I'd like a little bit more detail, then, come to us, come to me or come to Tom, and we'll try and help you. And if we don't know either, we'll figure it out, or we'll learn from somewhere and tell you. Is that okay? Yeah? Any other points anyone wanted to make? No? Okay. So you get the point about effervescence, right? That it's this thing that gets people excited, bubbly. It comes collectively and people feed off each other's excitement. So those of you who go to raids or football matches, you know that feeling. Right? And religion is very good, or ritual is very good at producing effervescence. And those of you who read Srinivas will see that the priests put in so much work into producing this effervescence. Because these rituals are periodic, they happen over and over and over again. And you can't guarantee that people will feel this excitement. So you'll see how the priests are making decorations for the gods that are made of currency notes from all over the world. They are doing automatons so that people are going, wow, look at that. So Srinivas's entire book is really about how these priests in particular try and create wonder in people. Because you can't guarantee that you'll get this level of effervescence. Yeah? It has to be manufactured. And that's a particular kind of skill. Yeah? That's why Srinivas's book is really the book that is focusing on ritual and the production of that wonder and that awe that is required for people to keep coming. Because if you have hundreds of temples in a city, How do you make sure that guy comes to your temple? I mean, that is also the evangelical question, right? Because it has to produce that feeling. Yeah? So pay attention to effervescence when you're reading your books. You'll see that the young Somali women also, they're looking for that effervescence. That's why they go mosque hopping. They just don't just want to go to the mosque where their mums go. They want to find these other mosques where the sermons are more thrilling, somehow they're feeling it. Yeah, so effervescence is really at the heart of what gets people coming back to religion over and over and over again. Okay? Any questions about any of that? No? Okay. So essentially, effervescence is a really important concept. Durkheim kind of introduces it into the anthropology of religion and ritual, but he's not the only person who's writing about it. In some sense, anyone who's writing about ritual is going to be writing about effervescence at some level or the other. Right? For Rapoport, it's that numinous, what he calls the numinous, that feeling that you can't express in words, that you feel, like sometimes the core of your very being. For Geertz, it's that intensification of emotions and values that ritual produces. Now this can be quiet. We see this in Lerman all the time. It can be very quiet. Or it can be really expansively celebratory. It doesn't have to be one or the other. You can do both. That peaceful prayer by yourself where you're starting to feel the presence of God, that gives you effervescence, as much as going to the church and having them sing and laying hands on each other. Yeah? Okay. So for Robbins, in fact, it's effervescence that makes certain forms of Christianity in particular, he's interested in Christianity, so much more popular than the established forms of Christianity, the ones that have been around forever and a day. They're not producing the kind of effervescence that, say, Pentecostalism does, or certain kind of like the Vineyard does, or this Liverpool One Church does. Because the person, my research informant, who joined Liverpool One Church and got baptized, he was born to the Church of England. He just didn't feel it there. So he started looking, because what he wanted was that buzz, that feeling of God and community. Yeah? So for people like Robbins, really, we can explain the growth of certain kinds of religious traditions or religious forms or new churches because of the effect of effervescence. This is why there are some that are growing so fast and some that are gently declining. Okay? It's not necessarily that the sum total of Christians is going down, but it is that they're moving around. Okay? Yeah, so this is just the point I was making, that you can also feel that kind of effervescence in private. And, as we were discussing earlier, you can feel effervescence in non-religious contexts as well. And again, effervescence is one of those concepts that has moved from the anthropology of religion and ritual into general usage. People recognize that this is something important that people want to seek out in some sense. And you can find it in all kinds of contexts. The rave, the football game, the dance hall. Dance hall? Do people even say that anymore? Whatever, but you know what I mean. In all kinds of spaces where there are people and somehow there's that buzz. That's it really. Keep an eye out for effervescence. It's great. Thank you very much. Office hours today 3 to 4. Fridays is an online office hour. I was slightly startled by the number of people who are emailing saying, why have you called this meeting? It wasn't a meeting, it was an office hour. So if you have any questions, anything you want to discuss, then, just show up to an office hour. You don't need an appointment. I'm always there, those 2 hours, 3 to 4 on Mondays and 10 to 11 on Fridays online. So just come and you can ask me anything you like about any aspect of this course or anthropology in general.